Hello, hello. Welcome to MarshStream. I'm Stephanie Weisman, Artistic Director and founder of The Marsh, and now MarshStream, bringing you tonight's Stephanie's MarshStream featuring Wayne Harris, and we are celebrating Martin Luther King. I'm still, you can tell, in the truck in Trinity Alps. Don't worry if it shakes. It's just a bear or a herd of elk. Please consider supporting MarshStream and its artists with a tax-deductible donation to the tip jar, or join our membership program. And please subscribe to the Marsh's YouTube channel and be notified when our shows go live. Let's get ready to welcome Wayne Harris, but first, a short bio. Wayne Harris is an award-winning solo performer. He's written 5 solo performances and plays, a writer, an educator, a curriculum innovator, and a musician and a singer. He is a gifted artist with wide-ranging interests, and he is, besides the 5 full-length plays, he's done presentations for schools, directs and designs for award-winning pageantry groups across the country. Now let's give a great big welcome to Wayne Harris. Hello, Wayne.
Good evening, everybody. Really happy to be here and sharing these particular stories this week, celebrating Martin Luther King's birthday, and also some of us celebrating a new direction, just generally for our country. So here's the piece. It's April 16th, 1963. Martin Luther King sits writing in the margins of a crinkled two-day-old newspaper. My dear fellow clergymen, while confined here in the Birmingham City Jail, I came across your recent statement calling my present activities unwise and untimely. Seldom do I pause to answer criticisms of my work and ideas, but since I feel that you are men of genuine goodwill, and that your criticisms are sincerely set forth, I want to answer your statement in what I hope will be patient and reasonable terms. I'm standing on stage at the Marsh, general lighting. My director, David Ford, is sitting in the 4th row, 3 seats over from the aisle, in the dark, pulling apart a loaf of bread. There's no one else in the theater. So David, I'm thinking King is there in the jail cell, right? And he's visited by Socrates, Thomas Jefferson, maybe St. Augustine. He's discussing the ideas of civil disobedience, nonviolence, the Constitution. And they literally are coming right into his jail cell, you know, like the ghost in A Christmas Carol. Maybe I could put on a toga. David says, "What do you know about Socrates?" And I say, "Not much." You see, 1 week earlier, literally 1 week earlier, I had received an email from Leslie R.D. at state.gov. It started off simply enough. It's a woman from the State Department's Cultural Affairs Office of Jerusalem. They were currently planning their cultural activities for the coming year, particularly looking for options for African American History Month in February. Black History Month in Jerusalem. The email went on to state that given that it will be the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail, they were hoping to use it as a part of their programming. She said that she had found information about me on my website and had been made aware of my work and was particularly interested in the work that I took to schools. She said that she was particularly interested in my program and curriculum on King's letter from a Birmingham jail, and inquired if I would be interested in traveling to Jerusalem for several days of performances and storytelling workshops. After checking the email for a postmark from Nigeria, I email Rachel Leslie back and I say that I am very interested in bringing my letter from a Birmingham jail piece to Jerusalem, and I look forward to hearing from her soon. I did not tell her that there was no letter from a Birmingham jail piece. Well, there was. Kinda. I mean, hey, isn't it David always says that 90% of writing is thinking about writing? Well, I had certainly thought about writing this piece, it was just that when I was putting my website together and working on the page, informing folks about the programs I did at schools, I indicated that I had programs for various ages, personal stories. I had an entire piece on John Henry, the steel driving man, and I had a program on King's letter from a Birmingham jail. See, I thought that would be a for sure moneymaker for me, in January, King's birthday, and then again in February, Black History Month. My thinking was, everybody hears the I have a dream speech every year. So, why don't I do something different? I was pretty excited about it at the time. I may have actually filled out a few 3x5 cards with ideas, Socrates being one of them. But it never went further than that. And well, the John Henry stuff started hitting, right? Everybody wanted the John Henry story, so that's what I did. And I kind of put Brother Martin on the shelf. Even in the darkness, I can tell David is not buying my Socrates idea. So, okay, maybe not Socrates, but what? How do I tell a story about a letter? By the way, a letter that is 21 pages long and would take over an hour to read. Letter from a Birmingham jail. Arguably the best essay ever written on the application of nonviolent direct action. It foretold the themes we would hear at the March on Washington, a document so eloquent yet so raw that it became the blueprint for the civil rights movement. How do I tell the story of that letter, of that man? And not to mention, I can't do Martin Luther King. I can't sound like him. Every time I'm speaking one of those memorable, poetic, and heavenly inspired passages from one of his speeches, I end up sounding like Colonel Sanders hawking KFC. The arc of the universe always bends towards justice, and it's finger-licking good. So there it was. David and I had 2 months to get it done. Me taking the words of MLK to the West Bank. A timeline from hell to tell the story of a prophet to Palestinian students. And all the time I'm thinking, why me? It's not like that I had been some kind of true believer of the civil rights movement, or any movement for that matter. You see, I had managed to ignore, discount, or romanticize so many watershed moments during the last 50 years. During the Vietnam War, I was a hippie wannabe. Yeah, heard about all the free love stuff, and I was so gonna do it with the white girls. Shit. Never realizing what was really happening. That my own brother was being swallowed up by an illegal war, and that he would come back from those rice paddies broken, like so many others. Civil rights? Well, I like the music. And I thought the Panthers looked really tight in all that leather and the beret, I used to buy a copy of the Black Panther paper every week. I would stick it in my book bag, cruising around Los Angeles City College. It was more of a prop than anything else. I'm pretty sure I didn't read much of it. In the 80s, when crack was devastating black communities throughout the U.S., I was up in Canada, being more of a black novelty than a black threat. Doing it with some white girls. Eventually I married one. So why is it me here? I mean, really, what right do I have bringing this story about this man to these kids?
Thank you. What a wonderful excerpt. Well, I have to ask the first question. Have you decided why you?
Stephanie, can you hear me okay from back here? Am I good?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. I was sharing with Brian, our producer, our wonderful producer, that I've been writing this piece for 7 years. And, it always takes a while to write a piece, but not typically 7 years. And part of the process, the journey with this piece is to try to figure out what it is that happened to me in those 10 days when I was in the Middle East. And it absolutely changed me in ways. And I think this piece has been a way to kind of work through that.
Well, yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about the piece, the setting? Actually, not the piece,
Mm-hmm.
the letter from the Birmingham jail. So Martin Luther King was in jail, right? And this is where he wrote the letter. You want to talk a little bit about this?
Absolutely. Well, it's 1963. It's prior to the March on Washington. There are a lot of factions in the civil rights movement. There wasn't just a King and his groups. There were lots of others, and the situation in Birmingham was a bus boycott. And also them going into businesses in the white downtown areas and such. And King came down there, and they, with some of the young protesters, some of the college students, and they started doing the sit-ins at the lunch counters and going into places they weren't supposed to go and getting arrested. And there was a letter written, an open letter written to Martin Luther King from various clergymen in Birmingham, both black and white, who basically were saying, man, you really shouldn't be down here stirring the pot. We're good down here in Birmingham, and you don't need to be bringing your civil rights here. We can work through our own problems. Well, that letter was King's response to that open letter that had been in the, I believe it's the Birmingham Gazette. And he had to write it in the margins of a newspaper. They wouldn't give him paper in the jail. And when the other people who were helping to put the protest together, when they came to visit him, he gives them this newspaper with literally that letter written in the margins, And so it's that's the opening scene, and that's kind of a little bit of the background for that letter.
So how long was he in jail then, and how did he get out?
That's a good question, Stephanie. I don't have that right away. He wasn't there very long because he was out, and I want to share this with you, another excerpt. He was out in time for what they called the Children's Crusade. So I don't think he was in there for a long period of time.
Yeah, I think I read something like he had to pay $180,000 bail. He had to
Oh,
get $180,000 bail. I'm not sure about that. So he could get out. So
ah,
I think he got out because he got bailed out.
I'm
Uh,
absolutely going to have to check that out so I can have that in my research binder.
So even though it's very much why me, you did decide to write this. And why did you decide to write this? Even though you're like, why me? Why me? But you put this up on your website that you were going to write it even though you hadn't written it. And what inspired you to even delve into this before you were forced into actually doing it?
Well, Stephanie, as I said in that piece, it was pretty pragmatic, you know, putting together pieces that I could perform in February and January, and kind of be able to create a pieces that basically I could sell to middle and high schools, and perform. So it was kind of pragmatic. I think this piece though is about my my relationship to King. Way early when we were growing up, um, in my neighborhood in St. Louis, uh, there were kind of two factions, right? There was those at church. Most folks were in the church, and most folks in the church followed King and their approach to civil rights. But on the streets, where I hung out, everybody followed the Panthers because they were cool. In fact, we used to sing, we shall overcome as long as we can run. It was, it was kind of it was so commercialized for me and so not real. And in so many ways, I missed it. And in so many ways, my experience in Jerusalem, in Palestine, helped me to grow in terms of my relationship to King and what's important about the things that he did.
And the non-violence here that he was preaching, right?
Absolutely.
Um, I pulled a quote here. Uh, it says that people have a moral responsibility to break unjust laws and to take direct action rather than waiting potentially forever for justice to come through the courts.
That guy could write.
Yep. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Yes.
So, Wayne, because it is Martin Luther King, I have a very brief Martin Luther King story, which you probably heard before, but I'm going to just say it right now.
Okay.
One time on our yearly trip to Florida from upstate New York, we were in the airport and there was Martin Luther King Jr. And my mother took us up there and we got his autograph, Wayne.
Get
Me and
out.
my sister got his autograph.
Do you still have it?
No, I can't. It's too late now, but during the times before we tried and tried, we never found it. But oh well.
Okay.
Anyway, so from this, this piece is about you suddenly having to write this piece, and then you actually had to go to Jerusalem. So, do you want to? I think you're going to do some excerpts about that trip as well. Is this the time for that, or do you have an intermediate excerpt, or what do you want to do?
I'll talk about a couple of things that happened along the way, and then maybe we can talk from there. Area just outside of Jerusalem, right? Looks like the Bible. I mean, really, it looks like the movie set for King of Kings or the greatest story ever told. You pick it. I mean, there are these hillsides, these layered hillsides with olive trees along the way, and there are sheep herders, actual sheep along the way. It was beautiful, Unfortunately, every once in a while you would run into these walls that were all over the place. But anyway, we're driving, right? And we're going to Jenin for really my first time performing. We come to an Israeli security checkpoint. The car slows down. We're into a very long line of cars, and across from us is an even longer line of people on foot with Israeli security forces in full armor holding MTAR-21s, machine guns, I found out, and they're spaced every 20 feet or so. They all look so young. Ezra, our driver, he's waving these papers outside the window, getting one of the soldiers' attention. But he looks over, right? The kid looks over, but before coming over, he motions for backup. And now we have 4 fresh-faced, highly armored 19-year-olds approaching our cars with guns drawn. Sarah, the tour manager, she turns around and says, "No pictures." Ezra explains that we're from the consulate on our way to Jenin. As 2 of the soldiers are kind of circling the car, another checks our plates, which clearly say U.S. consulate. The soldier looks grimly at Suzanne and reaches his arm out, and without being asked, Suzanne gives him her passport. He passes it to one of his partners, and he looks into the car at me, kind of knocking his helmet sideways. He looks so young. I mean, they all do. It's as if they were pretending to be soldiers. But when I'm looking there, I see something else. And as I hand over my passport, I see it in all of their faces. It's fear. This place, this security checkpoint is about that. It exists because of fear, and that fear exists on both sides of the equation. It reminds me of Oakland, 92nd and International, or Union Boulevard in St. Louis. When I was 15 years old, one night I was being driven home by some friends of mine. We had been drinking and such, but they let me off right in front of my house. And I'm going up the stairs, and I'm about to put the key into the lock when I hear, "Halt! Halt!" I turn around. I said, "Halt! Halt!" Here is this young cop pointing a big gun at me and shaking. "Get down! Get down!" I did not know what to do. I started laughing. "You think this is funny? You think this is funny? Get down! Get down on your face!" I was frozen, and all I could do was laugh. This white man with a gun, this very scared white man with a gun, was shaking, and I was laughing at him. And this moment seemed to last forever. Him screaming at me and me laughing at him. This is not good. And in the midst of all this screaming, laughing, and impending doom, I hear the screen door open behind me. And my mother, she calmly says, "Put the gun down, son. Put the gun down." And then the cop did what everybody does when my mama tells him to do something. He put the gun down. I spent the rest of the night up in bed shaking and listening to my mother in the next room praying and crying. Yeah, this is what's most familiar to me here in the West Bank. That feeling of the oppressed and the oppressor caught in some type of passion play, some inevitable tragedy. I'm here in the Holy Land, for God's sakes. And again, I feel the fragility of the moment. Being on the edge of something that could go wrong at any minute. I feel the fear. The soldier says, You from California? And I say, yes. And he says, cool. The soldier hands back the passport and waves us through. We sit in silence as Ezra gets up to speed on the highway. The streets to Janine are narrow, shops are everywhere, bikes, cars, scooters, traffic everywhere. Traffic signals, stop signs, nowhere to be seen. We are met at the school by Michael Dorma, social studies teacher, and he's from Indiana. It's so great to see you. The kids are really excited to meet you and hear your story about King. Michael is young, lanky, and has this smooth gait to his stride as he walks. He speaks of his students with such pride. It's one of the best 10th grade classes I've had anywhere. In preparation for your visit, I had them read your curriculum about King's letter. And for balance, I assigned them to read Malcolm X's Ballad or the Bullet. And let me tell you, we've had some interesting discussions so far. Several of our students have relatives in Israeli prisons, and a few of the boys have been arrested in the past. Feels like Oakland again. I tell Michael that's a great idea, with the compare and the contrast. I do not tell him that I have not read Malcolm X's essay. So as I'm searching, my phone for enough bars to maybe get a Wikipedia, on the subject, I'm pretty quickly whisked out onto stage. Okay, it'll be an interesting Q&A. I walk out on stage for the first time in the West Bank. No idea what to expect. And quite frankly, I'm a little surprised. These students, they look like students. I could be at Berkeley High, very few scarves, burqas, just an auditorium of what we would all deem to be 10th and 11th graders. You know how that moment when you first come on stage, when you are just allowing the audience to see you and you see them? Well, this time felt a little bit more suspended than usual. I found myself audiencing myself, seeing me, seeing them, seeing me. Not good. Okay, so breath, right? I start my opening. My dear fellow clergymen, rarely do I find the time to answer my critics. They're listening, right? Not so sure they're engaged, but they are listening hard. Breathe. Since I feel that you are men of genuine goodwill, and that your criticisms are sincerely set forth. Yeah, they are listening, settling in, and so do I. And then I get my first laugh, and we're doing it okay. I mean, things are going okay. After a while, I'm remembering the script fairly well. I mean, the piece isn't in my body, but I'm managing to get through it. A little over halfway through the piece, there's a part of the play that speaks to the children's crusade during the boycott in Birmingham. It's May 2nd, 1963, and some 5 or 6 weeks into the Birmingham protests. Every day there had been a kind of a routine of protesters attempting to sit at lunch counters or go into segregated areas of downtown, Usually groups of 15 to 20 adults and college students. They would be confronted by the police, told to disperse, refused, and then taken to jail. But the boycott, the energy had just stalled. King and the other organizers, they needed something to spark the city. sparked the nation. So on this day, May 2nd, 1963, the first group of 20 protesters that came out of the church seemed younger than usual. They were stopped, told to disperse, refused, and then taken to jail. And soon after that, another group of 20 young children came out of the church singing, "We Shall Overcome." And they were stopped, told to disperse, refused, and were taken to jail. And then another group of 20 children, and then another. The police sergeant in charge that day said, "You could hear the singing coming from the church getting louder and louder as these kids, and I mean little nigger children, are coming out in droves." I see that king fella and I says, "How many you got in there?" And he shouts back at me, "At least 1,000. And I says, "God almighty." We were running out of paddy wagons and they just kept coming, singing that song, clapping, and just as nice as you please, going to jail. Babies going to jail. I know old Bull Connor was mad as hell, but I had to call the sheriffs to help out. We finally started carting them off in school buses. Some as young as 6 years old. God almighty. I told those children in Palestine that I could imagine, that I could see those children in that church gathering their courage to march out that door, singing that song. Not sure what was waiting. Police dogs, fire hoses, seeing the distorted faces of racists screaming and jeering at them, marching into that hatred. And I can imagine the parents of these children in that church that night, not knowing what was happening with their children. A Negro in jail can just disappear sometimes. I see them all gathering courage in that church. It's one of the blessings of telling this story, telling the history of that struggle and those children in that song. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday. So as I start singing the song, right, I'm looking out at the audience and I see their faces start to animate. Students in the audience sitting up to listen. Lips moving, at first silently, but soon with voice. I realized they were singing this song with me. Now, I usually only did one verse in the play, but I was so taken back by the singing, I sang another verse. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. And they got louder, so I got louder, and we sang another verse. We will live in peace. We will live in peace. We will live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday. It was not the last time that I would stop the play to sing an old Negro spiritual with the people of Palestine. Why you use the word nigger? It's bad, right? Now, that wasn't the first question I got at the Q&A after the performance, but it was the first one I remember. This 15-year-old Palestinian student looking me straight in the eye, and I tell her that I use the word in context to the story, the time period, and the characters involved. But when I watch the YouTube, the Snoop Dogg, and the Dre, they use that word all the time. They call each other, the nigger. I tell her that some people in the black community feel that by using the word, they're taking ownership. They're being empowered by using it. She looks at me and she says, "Do you use that word?" No. My mother would kill me. We laugh. All of us. Arab, African, American, we laugh. The same knowing laugh about mothers. But it was the Q&As that were the most revealing in each city. Jericho, Bethlehem, Ramallah. Each city, the questions were varied, certainly, but yes, young lady. No, I really don't know that much about the Kardashians. You, young man in the back. Well, I think Obama is certainly trying to be open-minded about things, certainly more so than other administrations, but I can't say exactly what that looks like. No, you're correct. Many of the civil rights leaders were killed. King, Malcolm, Medgar Evers. You're right, the Black Panthers have to be considered. There have been quite a few. It was during these Q&A sessions where I heard from a student that told me about her brother, a UCLA grad who, with his degree in genetics, had come back to work with the farmers in the West Bank, only to be put in jail in an Israeli prison for weeks after he came home for reasons no one can find out. And this is fine, legal for the Israelis to do. I learned how students in Ramallah, 50 miles from Jerusalem, needed a day pass to go into the old city. It's a wonder they throw rocks at security vehicles.
Oh, wow, what a story, right? What a story. Did you get a sense of how, besides the Q&A, but in terms of the feeling, how the kids were affected by it?
An interesting point, and I should have made this prior to reading that section. The night I got to Jerusalem, I had a meeting with Leslie, who was the State Department Cultural Affairs officer, and she went over all of the security stuff, and she was going to she was going to be the tour manager, and she went through all of this stuff. Well, the next morning, Stephanie, when they picked me up at the hotel, we don't go out onto the road. We actually go to the consulate first. And I'm told at the consulate that there had been an incident at one of the prisons the night before. A Palestinian prisoner had died suspiciously. And so they said there was activity around the area. And they were kind of being really kind of weird about it. And I finally realized that, Leslie, you're not going on this tour because they don't let State Department officials go out when there's something going on because they don't want them to be asked questions or, So I'm now doing this tour with an all-Palestinian crew. Both Suzanne, the tour manager, and the driver are Palestinian. So I think that we probably would have gotten better treatment had there been a U.S. State Department official with us. And in a lot of ways, I maybe heard things that I might not have heard had there been a U.S. State Department official there, both from the entourage that I was with and from students. Very politicized, these students. Much more aware of our culture than we are of them. And the one piece that I talked about just happened to be a Quaker school that was in Jenin, and it was one of the more liberal schools. One of the pictures that we showed at the beginning here, I'm in an all-girls school, and there you do see the scarves and the full-on Muslim attire, and just an amazing audience, and they too sang along with that song. That song means something to people in Palestine, and it was such a remarkable experience too. And I experienced that everywhere I went. People sang along with that song every time I sang it.
So can you draw you did a little bit with the, the police and all that. Can you draw a little of the similarities between your life growing up, the life now, and what's going on there?
Every morning, I would sit out front of my hotel, coffee, cigarettes, people watching, right? I was at the East Jerusalem Hotel, which was right across the street from this transportation hub, which was right across the street from the old city at the Damascus Gate, right there, this huge Damascus Gate. I could look out my window and see it. And there would be Arab merchants opening shops, platoons of Hasidic Jews moving quickly in serious conversation, young Palestinians waiting at bus stops, tour buses dropping off groups of religious pilgrims from around the world. I'd sit there and I would be listening to the rhythm of each new language as Africans from Ghana or Filipinos from Manila, Jews from New Jersey, they're disembarking off these buses. Different languages for sure, but they're all really excited. Breathless anticipation of going into the holy city. And there I sit on a 2,000-year-old wall, smoking Marlboros, taking in the sounds of the place, smelling fresh pita coming out of clay ovens. It had been a very rough, emotional week for me, telling my story to those children and hearing their stories. I had come out of the West Bank with much more learned than taught. I had no idea the level of oppression I would witness, the feeling of being in an occupied community and realizing it's not any different from home than St. Louis, than Atlanta. I mean, here it's walls made of stone and checkpoints. In America, it's economics and mass incarceration. But the way it sits here, it's the same. I mean, just being with those kids who every day have to make the real decision to move forward in peace or throw stones at security vehicles. And here I am bringing the story of Martin Luther King, paid by the State Department, by the citizens of the United States to what? Pacify? Sell them on the idea of no violence, work within the system, change the hearts of men through non-violent, civil kind of disobedience. I mean, why should these kids listen to me? I remember that little girl in Ramallah who told me that her favorite part of the play was when I told the story about the 4 little girls killed in a church bombing, because it reminded her of the brave Palestinian martyrs who have died for statehood, also a righteous cause. I wanted to tell her that I don't believe they are martyrs. They were victims. I wanted to tell her Hamas strapping dynamite on a 14-year-old girl and putting her on a bus is not courageous. Those little girls in Alabama were not soldiers in the Civil Rights Campaign. They were little girls walking down the stairs to their Sunday school class, victims. And the guy I'm here telling you inspirational stories about, well, we killed him. I wanted to tell her this, but I say nothing. By the time I was 18 years old, I had seen the deaths, the murders of many martyrs. Martin, Malcolm, Fred, those 4 little girls in Birmingham, those 3 young men in Mississippi, the Kennedys. I remember folks marching about it, singing about it. We made motion pictures about it. We had photos of them in every school. The 60s and the 70s had so much fucking potential for revolution. I mean, real revolution. A real consciousness raising moment that somehow turned into the 80s. Arguably the most selfish, materialistic, and destructive time in our nation's history. This is MLK. He's speaking at a synagogue just before his death. We have allowed our civilization to outrun our culture. We've allowed our technology to outdistance our theology. And for this reason, we are caught up with many problems. Through our scientific genius, we have made of the world a neighborhood. But we failed through moral commitment to make of it a brotherhood. So we've ended up with misguided missiles and misguided men. We are entering the Garden of Gethsemane. It's my last night in Jerusalem. And I wanted to share this before I go. In terms of my journey and what this has done for me, it was the last night, and we go into the Garden of Gethsemane. It's early dusk, and the sun is starting to move just behind Mount Olive. It's elongating the shadows of ancient olive trees. I see faces in the trunks of these gnarled trees, bodies intertwined and struggle, twisted. I see the face of 9-year-olds in Oakland. I see King's face. I see my nieces. I see my mother praying, and I see the face of Jesus, who in this garden of twisting paths and hidden corners is first overcome with doubt, questioning the plan. Jesus says, "Take this cup from my lips, O Lord." The Bible says he is literally sweating like blood dripping from a wound as he looks for reason and purpose in this beautiful, fragile garden. On the night of his betrayal, as Judas and the Romans are coming his way, Jesus is in crisis. I mean, here we are, the big payoff of the Passion Play, right? And our hero has doubts. Jesus is scared. And so God sends down an angel to strengthen him. According to the Gospel of Mark, steady Jesus for the trials ahead. Was it like that for King as well? I mean, was he in doubt as he stepped out onto the balcony at the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis? I mean, only the night before he said, "I have been to the mountaintop. I've seen the promised land." We all know about that prophetic speech. However, maybe not as many of us know that the sermon he was working on in his hotel room the day he died, the title of that sermon was to be "Why America May Go to Hell." That was going to be his next sermon. Was King, like Jesus, doubting the path? questioning the script? And was he, like Jesus, sent an angel to strengthen him before he stepped out onto that balcony? We have difficult days ahead in the struggle for justice and peace, but I will not yield to a politic of despair. When teaching my storytelling class of fourth graders in Oakland, I always tell them what makes a good story. You gotta have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I tell them that for a good ending, we should tell what was changed and what did we learn. I mean, even when the ending isn't nice and there is sadness, a lot of my young Oakland students, they have violence all around them. There's domestic violence, shootings. How do I get this child in Oakland to understand, this child in Ramallah to understand that contrary to what he sees every day, the violence, the shootings, how do I explain a nonviolent path is the way to go? What does Martin Luther King say that a child can learn from 50 years later, this child in Oakland, this child in Ramallah? I tell the 9-year-olds that even when the stories about violence and guns in our neighborhoods seem to never stop, there is a better way. And our stories can be about that. I mean, we can rise up from even the worst times. And I find the good in our stories. We can find the good in our stories. We'll find out what we learn from our stories and then share that. I remind the class that King said, out of a mountain of despair, there can be a stone of hope. Sitting there in the Garden of Gethsemane, where a prophet met his fate, faced his destiny, I contemplated my own.
So deeply powerful. Amazing. I've never seen this before, believe it or not. How long is the entire piece, Wayne?
Well, Stephanie, it's, some might say too long, which is, I would say right now there's probably at least 90 minutes of material, maybe more.
Wow. Well, I'm going to hope and I'm going to ask you to put it up here on MarshStream because we all want this. We all need this. This is so relevant. And, we've got a chat going on here that's very, very good. In fact,
Great.
they know the answers. I put out $180,000 bail. I was wrong by $20,000.
All right.
It was only $160,000. Thank you, Bernie Riff.
All right, Bernie.
And he was bailed out by Walter Reuther, president of the United Auto Worker at that time.
Oh.
And Bruce Jeanette says the bit about the Israeli soldiers in the car is so profound in the Oakland PD. And Sherry says, very powerful. The questions regarding Dr. King and the civil rights movement from the kids were insightful and relevant to their experience with the Israelis.
Yeah.
So we're going to show this weekend. You can come back here and see it. You can tell your friends about it. Kind of a pre thing to Wayne doing the whole thing, which I don't think he's committed to yet, but we're going to get him to commit to him. Don't you all think so?
I very well could be writing this piece for a long time.
Well, we won't have you writing it. We're going to have you doing it. So you're going to have to see David Ford and watch him eat his bread. And I'm assuming you don't have much about Socrates in it.
No, we didn't. We went another route. we went a whole different direction than that. But no, it was really nice revisiting the piece. Just my own personal relationship to what has been going on in the new consciousness that we have, with the BLM movement, with hopefully taking advantage of this time again. It really is an opportunity for real change. And I'm trying to shed my cynicism and believe in it. I watched our president, when he spoke about the uncivil war that we've been engaged in, but that the possibility of moving beyond that. And I absolutely have to believe that, or otherwise we get nothing done.
Yep. We must move forward, hopefully onwards and upwards with whatever in-betweens we end up with. But thank you so much for bringing us some of Wayne and Martin Luther King during this week, this incredible week of change. But thank you, Wayne. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who joined us. Thank you for everyone who said these wonderful things in the chat. Wayne will get
Just
you a
reading.
copy.
Thank you so much. Right on.
Yeah. All right.
How do I describe my journey with
your mother who takes care of you, who takes you to the doctor when you're sick? Your mother.
Good morning, New York. Buenos dias. It's me. What's up?
We went out for lunch at a sushi place where she tried sushi for the first time and she liked it.
I see that change can happen. I know things can shift and change for good.
I am dizzily dazzled with stars in my eyes.
Same level as I broke my neck. But he's not getting the same return of function I am.
And I don't want any of your smart aleck sex talk that I usually get when I get.
This is beyond the marsh because what you're doing is planting beautiful seeds for artists to grow.